Welcome back. So one of the real cool things about Angular in my mind is the component setup. So we have a way for us to kind of split up our code into multiple minor components that can then be reused all over the code if we want to. But the cool thing is that each chunk, each component is like a feature. So it pretty much means that we can start really creating code that is very easy to read and very simplistic for the specific operation it needs. And I think that's one of the greatest things about the way Angular structured the code. So what we're going to do this lesson is we're going to try and take this app component we have right here and split it into another component. Take what doesn't belong in the app component and put into a new component that we're going to call CustomerListComponent. So let's just start out by having a look at right now we have a lot of code in app component and app component HTML that doesn't really belong inside our main component, and the app component itself should be your main component. That should be the place where everything begins. So what I want to do is I want to create a new directory, a new component, and we're going to call that customers. So the customers directory that we're going to build right here is going to have it's going to be the general area for the entire customer epic story, the entire customer. There might be a way to add customers that would be inside that customer folder, a way to list all customer, a way to look at details for a single customer, maybe even an update for updating a single customer. So now that I have a directory, put all my customer features in, what I want to do next is I want to run a small command right here called ng for generate. So that's going to generate a new C, that's a component. So I want to generate a new component, and I want to put that component inside customers, and I want to call the component customers list, like this. So what does this actually do? Well, it's going to create a new component. Right now we only have the app component, which is again the main component in my system, and to start making features I'm going to start adding components for each feature that I need. And this component I'm building right now is going to be a component that can list all customers. That's why I'm going to create a component called customers list. So I'm going to execute this command right here, and it's going to generate some files for me, and it's going to update the app module. So the app module is kind of the heart of my entire application. That's going to know everything that's going to happen inside the Angular application. So let's just try and have a look at these different areas that I built right here, jumping into the app module, and notice that a new component is available right here under declarations. I've just added a new component called component list, and there's also the app component right above that one, which is the main component that we have for our system. So now we have two components available. Now we'll look into modules later and how we can kind of split things into multiple modules if you want to make your code even more generic. That's not for now. Let's try and check out the files that was created for me, and they were created under a new folder. Notice when I ran that command right there, it created a new folder for me called customers list under customers, and in that folder it added all these files. And again, if you read the files, you have a TS file, which is your actual component, an HTML file, which is going to be where you put your HTML code, CS file where you put your CS code, and CSS code, and a spec file which is going to be for testing. We'll get into testing later maybe, but not for now. So that's that's the full file you kind of get automatically generated right here for you. And let's just have a look at the first file, which is going to be the TS file. And again, notice we have the selector, which is going to be the name that we're going to use to kind of use this new component. We have the template URL and the style URL to kind of map the TypeScript file together with our HTML and CSS code. Sweet. So let's try and jump into our app component, because I want to now start moving everything that doesn't belong inside the main component. Think of the main component again as the starting point or something like that. It doesn't need to know anything about customers, because later I'm going to have orders, I'm going to have products, I'm going to have a welcome page. If I was to put all of that inside one component, it would be impossible to read. So everything that belongs to customer, I'm going to move that now from my app component TypeScript file. Let's cut it from here, and I'm going to paste it into my actual customer list TypeScript file, because I want that logic to be inside the customer component instead of being inside the app component, again the main component, right? So let's put that, move that up here instead, and let's just do a bit of refactoring. There we go. So now we have added all the code that belongs inside a customer list. We've moved that from the app component TS file into the customer list TS file. And I'm also going to do something else here. I'm going to just move the initialization of the customer into the ng init. So let's just briefly talk about the ng init. The ng init is just a way for you to actually go in, and every time a component is being triggered, for instance, if I go into my customers view, automatically ng-init is called, and here it'll create an empty list for me and just populate that and add it to that property right there. So there we go. Now we've kind of set up our customer list component with the information about customers that we just took from the app component. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to restructure our code so it's easier to work with and it's in smaller chunks. Now the second thing I want to move is, of course, the way I present my customer in the HTML. So I'm going to cut that from here, and I'm going to move that code that's, again, customer specific, move that into the customer list HTML code right here. And let's just get rid of the old code, just paste this new code in there. So now, again, look at how simple this class right here actually is, this HTML. It's very simple. There's only information about the actual customer list code, right? So it's very simple to read. And that's the goal right here, simplicity of reading it, but also it's very easy for us to maintain this code now, because if we are working together in a huge team, I can just focus on the customer list code and you can focus on the customer ad code, and we won't get merge conflicts later on. So that's also very powerful. So that's why we want to learn how to split things up into smaller bits and pieces. So now that we've kind of moved the code, let's start using the code in our current setup. So we're going to grab the selection name because that's the tag name that we need to use, right, inside our current code. So notice right now it doesn't know anything about the customers list anymore because I just moved all that code, right? And this is still the main starting point. The app component HTML is the starting point, and right now it doesn't know anything about customers because I moved it all. So we need to, of course, go and add that tag. Just like I showed you earlier in the index HTML, I'm now going to add the app customers list tag in here. As soon as I do that and I save this, it's actually going to now show the customer again. So I pretty much I just removed the responsibility of the customer list into its new component, its own small, simple component. And that was kind of the goal of this lesson. And it runs again, so everybody's happy. So now you know how to generate new components and how to actually take components and move them into specific areas. Now I could put this tag anywhere I want it now, into any area that I wanted to use a list of components. I can now reuse that code and just add that tag anywhere, and that's the power of it. So now we can start making very small, simplistic components and reuse them all over our code, and we're going to use that later on as well. So that's it for this lesson. See you next time. Have fun.